Luiz, Inácio Lula da Silva has launched his campaign for October's presidential election, promising to rebuild Brazil. He led the Workers' Party to victory in 2003 and presided over an economic boom.
Lula is trying to play a bit on nostalgia, promising voters that Brazil can get back like it was when he was president more than 10 years ago. It's one of the most astonishing political comebacks we've seen in modern times. If you look back 4 years ago, Lula was in jail, accused of corruption, sentenced. And now, 4 years later, he regained his political rights. He managed to discredit all the court decisions that were ruled against him. There was a big revision of his corruption case, so it is quite astonishing that all of this happened in a short period of time.
We speak now to political analyst Geraldo Zahran. He joins us now from Sao Paulo, Brazil. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, Professor. Let's just start with, as we mentioned, the fact that he has been imprisoned almost trying to rebuild himself. And I know there's been much made of political conspiracy and bias by a judge in his imprisonment. But I want to talk about brand Lula da Silva at the moment. So he was convicted of multiple bribe-taking charges and sentenced to a 26-year prison term. How does this become the person that you want to vote into Brazil for a better, prosperous Brazil? And we'll look at his legacy previously, but I want to start with this particular point.
Well, he was charged for bribery, but the prosecutors could never point to any bribes that he actually took. The whole process was sped up. We later found out that the judge and the prosecutor were talking to each other and sort of dealing the process together. So all those charges were dropped. But even if you discount that, in 2018, when we had our last presidential election, Lula was leading the polls by a substantial margin up until the moment where he lost his political rights because of that scandal. So it's not surprising that once his political rights were given back to him, he jumped right back at where he was in 2018, leading the polls. And his 8 years in power appeared very prosperous for Brazil, domestically and internationally. So that's what he's recalling right now.
All right, so we'll talk about what he achieved, but Jair Bolsonaro won on the outrage of the accusations against Lula da Silva as well as his Workers' Party. Have the tables turned? What has changed?
I don't think the tables have turned. I think in 2017, 2018, we're living through a moment where we had an economic downturn. Lula was not in power. Dilma was in power. People had the memory of a very good Lula government, but the 6 years of the Dilma government, his successor, they were not as prosperous as the Lula period. There was a lot of economic downturn, outrage at the scandals that were coming out. The media, the political class, they sort of went into this vendetta against Lula. Now, the Workers' Party has been 6 years away from power. The Brazilian population actually saw what a right-wing government in power leads to. We had austerity measures during the Temer government. We had austerity measures during the Bolsonaro government. You had the answer to the COVID-19 was a catastrophe. The country is in much worse condition than it was in 2016 when Dilma was impeached. So we had a sort of a nostalgia for the Lula years, and we have a very recent memory of what Jair Bolsonaro has done. Bolsonaro still has this very aggressive rhetoric against Lula, against the Workers' Party, a sort of a smear campaign, lots of fake news and accusations. But that since we saw the results of his government, that smear campaign has limited results. So he's stuck with 20-25% of hardcore supporters. and let's see what happens until October.
As you mentioned, the polls see Lula maintaining a comfortable advantage. Let's look at juxtapose, as you've just mentioned, and this is what I meant by the tables turning, the legacies of both men. So President Lula credited with lifting some 30 million Brazilians from poverty. Jair Bolsonaro himself has been credited with increasing welfare spending. So overall, in terms of the quality of life of Brazilians, if they were to put their mark on the ballot box at the moment, from that nostalgia, who are they likely to pick and why?
Well, Lula, with no doubt. Bolsonaro has increased the welfare spending because he had no other option. His economic policies of austerity, of neoliberalism have shown absolutely no result. Of course, he was hit with the COVID pandemic, but again, he answered to that slowly and late. We have people in hunger in Brazil, extreme poverty, problems that we had gotten rid of in the past 10 years are coming back. Very high levels of unemployment, of informal jobs. So if you were to compare directly the result of the past 4 years of Bolsonaro with the legacy of Lula, the answer is very, very clear. The problem is that's not what this election is going to be about. This election is going to be about the same thing that was in 2018. Bolsonaro appealing to the fears of the population, or to the fears of a very conservative population in Brazil, talking about the dangers of Lula, the dangers of communism, the dangers of corruption, all of these made up stories on the one side, and on the other side, the hope and the nostalgia that Lula wants to bring back. So that the election is going to be fought on narratives, not on economic indexes.
So let's talk about that. What is the real narrative in terms of the lived experience of Brazilians? Lula talks about incompetence and authoritarianism. His critics say he's made several blunders, as you mentioned, in terms of what is seen to be his conservative ways. His comments on abortion, on the police, and the middle class has said to have alienated some people. So just take us through that.
Well, Lula's been back in the game. He's been very slow. He just announced his campaign now. Some people said he was late to announce it. And he did that on purpose because he knows the moment he announces he's running, now it's official, he's going to become the main target of everybody. He's going to become the main target of Bolsonaro, because the only way Bolsonaro can get to the second round is, or even win, is appealing to Lula, appealing to the supposedly dangers that Lula portrays. And other candidates, third candidates, that are trying to sneak in the middle, it's very unlikely. They'll also aim at Lula and try to take votes from Lula. So Lula has been very strategic when to announce. We're some 5 months now from the election. He has built a very broad coalition. He appealed to former political adversaries, most well-known Geraldo Alckmin, former presidential candidate, former governor of Sao Paulo, someone that was at odds with Lula in many, many times. But right now they are together as a democratic coalition. Bolsonaro has been criticizing the election system in Brazil, has been claiming that the vote counting can be faked. We've seen that from other right-wing conservatives around the world. We've seen that in the United States with the Trump campaign. So Bolsonaro is running two campaigns right now. One, an election campaign, but also another smear campaign to try to create chaos and possibly challenge the result of the election. Lula is trying to appeal to a broader base. He knows he's not going to win just with his supporters, just with traditional left-wing PT supporters. So he knows he needs the younger generation. He knows he needs the centrists, and that's what he's trying to do. But this is basically an election about the future of Brazilian democracy.
And what is the housing future of Brazil according to what both candidates' visions are? I mean, it's quite fascinating for me, but I suppose I shouldn't be surprised that the favelas in Brazil have even become tourist sites, people touring to see how the poor live.
Well, that's a challenge that we face not so much at the federal level, but at the city and state levels. Large urban centers in Brazil have favelas. Historically, some of them become tourist attractions, like the ones in Rio. That's probably the ones you're referring
Yes.
to. But slums in other large city centers like Sao Paulo or Salvador or Belo Horizonte are much less attractive. I'm sorry about that. So this is a problem of living conditions, right? Sanitation, transportation, electricity generation. And with the current economic downturn during the pandemic, these places have become very, very dangerous. So, economic growth and prosperity will solve some of these issues, but we need to have very intentional policies if you want to turn this into living neighborhoods and give the people some dignity.
What about the international community? Who would they be backing? And we're obviously talking about the more powerful nations who would have interest in who is at the helm in Brazil. And I say this against the backdrop of, it seems now your position on the Russia-Ukraine conflict either gets you into a club that is for the approved or unapproved.
Well, the international community, Bolsonaro has been having trouble with the international community from the start. He declared his support for the Trump presidency. Early on, Trump is not around anymore. He took his time to recognize Joe Biden as the president of the United States. He got some struggles with Emmanuel Macron in France. With Angela Merkel in Germany. Of course, the Amazon and climate change have been topics that Bolsonaro has paid very, very little attention, and that put him in a difficult position. At the same time, Bolsonaro was also a critic of Russia and China in the past, and only recently has reached out to Vladimir Putin. Terribly sorry. Lula, on the other hand, is a well-known world leader. He was just on the cover of Times Magazine this week. He did say that the Ukraine invasion, there was also some blame to Zelensky and NATO in general. But you have to remember, Lula was the president responsible when the BRICS were created. He has supported South-South cooperation for a very long time. So even though he has warm relations with the United States and the European Union, he's still looking to the global South. So Brazil will take a more nationalistic approach to international relations, but I think it's clear that the international community is supporting democracy in Brazil, supporting that Brazil takes the lead on climate change like he used in the past. And that's clearly the values that the Lula campaign is defending and not the Bolsonaro administration, Ukraine aside.
Professor Zahran, thanks so much for speaking to us, sharing your insights. Political analyst, Professor Geraldo Zahran, speaking to us from Sao Paulo in Brazil.